Welcome to Partnerships for Profit, the podcast where we bring you inside the world of joint ventures, strategic partnerships, and powerful collaborations. Whether you're looking to expand your network, find new referral partners, or scale your business, you're in the right place. Let's get started.
Welcome back to another great episode of Partnership for Profits. I got a really fun guest today, somebody I've had the good fortune of talking with a few times over the past year as we've been helping her with some things. Today's guest is an attorney whose work changes lives and in many ways shapes families around her. Her name is Aylin Acikalin. She's the founder of Aylin Law, a family law practice that helps clients navigate some of life's most personal and challenging transitions with clarity, compassion, and confidence. And you do a little more than family law, but I know that's your primary area. Aylin, how you doing? It's good to see you.
Hi, how are you doing, Will?
I'm great. Thanks for giving me some time today and coming on and chatting with us. I want to kind of get into your area of law, your area of expertise, and how you're helping people out. Can you tell me a little bit about the firm? And because it's interesting that you're based in Louisiana, you do a lot of practice work in California. So can you kind of give our listeners and our viewers a little background on you and what you're doing to help out people and families?
Thanks so much for the opportunity, Will. Well, I am an attorney who's been practicing for 20 years. I haven't always been in family law. I worked primarily in government service prior to starting my own firm in 2023. I am practicing I have an office in the Bay Area in San Francisco, although I cover most of the Bay Area counties and also really can work anywhere in California. And I also have an office in New Orleans, Louisiana, and can take cases in the metro area, St. Tammany, Jefferson, Orleans, and such. So my road to becoming a family law attorney started about 2018. I decided to leave government service, and I was looking for what direction I was going to go into. Part of the reason I've been in government service is because of my desire to help people. I never went the kind of corporate defense, big law track.
Right.
So my sister, who is also an attorney, lives in San Francisco, and she invited me to take a shot at working in family law. That was in about 2018, and I wasn't initially barred or licensed to practice law in California. So I started working with her in a learning capacity, essentially as a paralegal, to kind of learn California family law while I studied to take the bar. I did take the bar over COVID, so I was able to do it remotely. And at that time, most of the practice of law in family court had moved online as well.
Right.
So once I became barred and started taking my own cases with her firm, I was then, able to continue working as an attorney in California and appear remotely. In family law cases, most of the court hearings tend to be in person, and then we can meet with our clients over Zoom by phone as well. And it really ends up being a huge cost savings for clients. And that enables me to have, a more reasonable rate because I don't have a lot of overhead for an office and for traveling and whatnot. Because as you know, lawyers do bill by the hour. So if, we're driving through traffic and sitting around waiting in court, we're billing for those hours. If you're appearing by Zoom and you don't have that extra time, that is definitely a savings to the client. Well, in about 2023, I decided to open my own firm to allow me to have more flexibility in my own schedule and control of my own schedule. And also because I wanted to open a Louisiana office because I am, through various life circumstances, I am barred in California, Louisiana, and Florida. So I can go on and on for you, but if you have some questions, jump in.
Yeah, for sure. I just kind of wanted to get into the background of how you got into family law. So that's great that we got into that. And I'm guessing that you found it to be rewarding. It's pretty different from government work for sure. That's a big change. So family law isn't about contracts or courtrooms necessarily. It's about people's lives. So I want to kind of get into how you're able to balance the emotional side of that work, which it can be very emotional at times, with keeping it business, and making sure that the things that get done need to get done. What's the mindset for you to make sure that both those things are being paid attention to?
Well, absolutely. When we talk about family law, it's essentially what attorneys refer to as a litigation type of law practice, compared to, say, mergers and acquisitions, or
Right.
estate planning, where you're reviewing and creating contracts and documents. We go to court, we fight for people's rights and their rights in their divorce, child custody, child support, spousal support, and domestic violence restraining orders. A majority of my cases do involve some type of domestic violence. The laws in California and Louisiana are quite different.
Mm-hmm.
In California, you're able to get a restraining order for emotional and financial abuse, what's known as also coercive control. Louisiana is more restrictive on what you can get a restraining order for. And it is certainly emotionally challenging when, even in a normal divorce where
Right.
there's not abuse involved, it's one of the most difficult transitions in people's lives, especially when there are children involved, young children, or children with disabilities or their own emotional challenges. So I'm more than attorney at times. I'm also a therapist. I advertise myself as a trauma-informed family law practice.
Mm-hmm.
It's very important to me because I went through my own divorce. And I don't talk about this a lot, but that was also one of the reasons I decided to change my law practice, is because although I'm an attorney, I had not practiced in family law. I was not familiar with it at all. I thought I knew what my rights were, but I didn't. And so I spent a lot of time learning about Louisiana family law, where I was divorced, and I was very surprised at some of the things that I found. And a fool has a lawyer, has himself for a lawyer, I think is something what the saying goes. So, of course, I did hire attorneys to represent me, and
Yeah.
I just didn't feel that I was getting the support that I needed beyond just what was written in the law, what the process was. I needed more, because this
Right.
was a very difficult transition for me. I had young children at the time. And so it was important for me, when I started working in family law, dealing with clients who were going through some of the similar things I had experienced, and many times much worse, that they had someone that they knew was going to have their back.
Right.
That they knew understood what they were going through, but could also guide them in the law process, and in a more global approach to how to adjust their lives, because the courts can only do so much, and how the client and how their former spouse or intimate partner behaves, they have to be able to deal with it going forward. For if there's children, 18 years, 10 years, And so they have to, I help them develop an approach to learn how to deal with the court system as well as their opposing party, as well as opposing counsel. It's a very multifaceted approach that requires a lot of work with psychologists, with financial planners, because you're talking about the breakup of a financial partnership as well.
Yeah, it's almost like I've been through divorce too. It's almost like a business is closing, because there's a business aspect of being married too, right? It's obviously there's an emotional side. That's where all marriages are really based on. But when you do bring two, lives together, it's like there's a business side of it too. So it sounds like you're what part of what you're doing is kind of putting together a team, beyond just you mentioned financial planners and psychologists and therapists and people like that. So are you do you have like a network of people that you're kind of using when the cases do come in, depending on what their needs are? I'm guessing you've got kind of a pretty strong network you've put together to kind of build out that team.
I do. I do have a team, and that's really what it requires, because as I mentioned, it's the end of a financial partnership, and many people who come to me, whether it's the husband or the wife or same-sex partners, one of them or sometimes both just really don't have an understanding of their financial picture.
Right.
And family law in Louisiana and California, and I would say most states, requires full financial disclosure before you divorce. So really everything is very above board, transparent. There are disclosure process that you have to go through to identify, characterize, and value assets and debts. And that's where it becomes kind of complicated. Usually, believe it or not, the custody issues are settled relatively quickly. Sometimes they can drag on, especially if you have, abuse involved, and you may need a child custody evaluation, things like that. But, sometimes it takes a long time to get a handle on where the assets are, what the asset is, because in both states, we have a community property state. And, without getting into too much detail, it matters when the asset was purchased,
right,
what investments were made into it, how it was paid down, with what funds. It may trigger reimbursement claims. There may be a post-separation accounting. It can get quite complicated. And so I typically work with forensic accountants, certified family law accountants who understand the various claims that a party can make, and that they know what they're looking for. You can't really just work with someone who's not familiar with the family law in your state if you're working with a financial expert.
So that's interesting you bring that up, because like I mentioned, I've gone through divorce, and the idea of having a forensic accountant look at everything and kind of figure out what came from where, and breaking all that down. My attorney and my ex's attorney, neither one of them mentioned anything like that. Is that a newer thing that's come into family law, or has that been around for a long time and we just had crappy lawyers who didn't tell us that that's something we needed to look at? I'm just kind of curious, because I'm in my experience, that was not something that was ever brought up.
Right. Well, it's not always necessary. I'm sure you went through a disclosure process, and I don't know what state you got divorced in Georgia. So I really don't know anything about Georgia law, but I'm sure that they require some disclosures. So you probably did a paper that listed.
We had to lay out assets and all that stuff and break it down.
Right. So if it's very straightforward, and, you've been married 20 years, you bought the house when you were married, the mortgage is in both your names, you saved money, you treated everything as, together while you were married, you wouldn't necessarily need a financial expert.
How much does that come into play with regards to like child support? I'm just curious.
I use financial experts less when it comes to child support, although famously I'll pull the lawyer speak. It depends. Child support is typically decided based on the income of the parties. Sometimes you can take into account assets if there are significant assets, and some other additional factors. So if it's straightforward, most states have a guideline formula for determining child support based on the timeshare, the income, sometimes the assets, things like that. And so it's a pretty straightforward calculation. Spousal support is a bit more complicated. There's a lot more discretion, many more factors, the length of the marriage, which spouse is working, how old they are, how close they're to retirement, things like that. Many, many factors. It's a lot more discretionary. And you have temporary spousal support, and then you have permanent spousal support. So in that case, if you have higher asset, higher wealth clients, then you probably want to get a financial expert to do your spousal support recommendations, analyze the income and assets and expenses, the marital standard of living, things like that.
Right. Shift gear a little bit. I got a question for you that's related to Louisiana. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, in Louisiana, you have to be separated for a year before you can get divorced. Is that correct?
That's if there's minor children.
If there's minor children involved. Okay. So my question is, so if you have minor children involved and you're in the middle of the dissolution of a marriage, and there is like abuse, like you're mentioning, happening domestically, or whether it's physical or emotional or financial, whatever it might be, are there workarounds for that year-long waiting period, or does that apply across the board when there's minor children involved? Are there extenuating circumstances if things are violent? Like, is there a way to dissolve that faster than a year? It just seems like there might be circumstances where like the idea of just being separated needs to end sooner than a year.
I don't know that off the top of my head. I believe that you can separate. You can divorce, but I don't want to say.
That's cool. I mean, I'm not asking for advice. I just kind of was curious what your thoughts were on that.
I'll as always, it's more complicated than it is.
It depends, right? Like you said.
No. It's not that it depends, but you can get around the waiting period if you have domestic violence situation. But usually what happens is you go in for your restraining order. That's an ex parte procedure, meaning that there's not notice and opportunity. You go and you tell the court, this is happening. The court looks at it and will issue a temporary restraining order. And then you will be set for a hearing. And then you can either have a hearing or you can have a full-blown trial sometime in the future. It's not until you get your permanent restraining order and a factual finding by the court that there was abuse that you're going to be able to use that to circumvent the time delay for the
right.
So, it may cut your time by 6 months, 3 months, but you would have to get your full finding after hearing on the issue of abuse. It's not going to be just on a temporary restraining order.
So what do you think is the reasoning why some states, Louisiana being one of them, have that rule in place where you have to be separated for a year before the state will grant you a divorce? Why is that? And I know it has to do with minor children, but I'm just kind of curious what you think is the reasoning behind that, and whether it's a good idea.
I can speculate. Historically, if you look at divorce law, it's been difficult to get a divorce, and it used to be that you have to prove fault, adultery or something like that.
Right.
So I think this is probably a remnant of that more conservative thinking of trying to give the parties time to perhaps separate and maybe potentially reconcile.
Right.
Also to ensure some amount of stability before there's a complete separation, complete divorce between the parents. It's really to protect the interests of the children.
The child, yeah. Makes sense. So when someone comes to, whether they call you or they come in to see you in person and they let you know, hey, this is something I'm going through. I need to file for divorce. What's your approach on those first visits? What do you talk to people about when they first come in? Is it more on an emotional side? Is there more empathy involved, or is it more of a, hey, let's get down to business and figure out what these steps are? How does the first meeting with you, what does it look like if I come in and I've got a situation that I need your help with on the family side of things?
Well, the first thing that I do is a conflict check to make sure that I don't have any conflicts of interests. Maybe the other side called me first.
Right.
Whether or not I took that case, if the other side has had some kind of consultation with me, I can't represent somebody.
Sure.
That's rare. But then I have a intake form to identify whether there's domestic violence involved, and if there is any immediate action necessary to protect the person who's come to see me or their children. If there is, then we immediately start working on creating a safety plan, perhaps filing a restraining order, making sure that they have the resources that they need and things like that. Many times, and I'm sure your listeners understand this, there's been a lot of education on domestic violence. People have a gut feeling that they're being abused. They don't want to believe it. They tend to minimize it. There's often memory gaps. And so it takes some time to get the story of what is going on and really identifying what's going on and what has been the impact on the client and their children, and then what is going to be the remedy that the court can provide to protect them. There's lots of different options. You can have a no contact order. You can have a no harassment order. You can have a temporary child custody orders put in place. You can have orders to go to batterer intervention for custody evaluation. All of these things can be looked at on a temporary and permanent basis, just within the context of a restraining order, even if you don't file a petition for divorce. Sometimes we, are in immediate need of creating safety. So
Right.
We file the restraining order first before we even look at the divorce. But in the beginning of the case, I spent a lot of time explaining the legal process, because that is certainly one level of this whole situation that creates a lot of fear of the unknown. What is this process? What do I have to do?
Right.
How am I going to get to the end? And of course, how much is this going to cost? And I tell people, this is my rate. I bill by the hour. And a lot of how expensive your case depends upon you and how much you're able to be organized and how much the other side is willing to cooperate and, how aggressive their attorney is going to be. I don't see a lot of the cases where people are amicably separating because, they tend to kind of handle their business on their own. And maybe they just come to me at the end because they need their agreement put into a legal form. But when you've got people that are really, butting heads
Right.
over custody, over money issues, it can get quite expensive. I've had cases that wrap up for $20,000. I've had cases that people have spent over $200,000 on attorney's fees, just not including expert fees. So, it really depends on a lot of factors, and how much people are willing to work with each other.
Right. Yeah, I mean, my divorce was not, we weren't butting heads for months and months and stretching it out over a year. So thank goodness for that. I'm glad that was not the case with us. And there were children involved too, but we were able to work things out kind of on our own and then go get a lawyer to kind of help us. We got attorneys to kind of help us finalize things. So I wish it was that easy for everybody, but I know that it's not, unfortunately. So last question for you, Aylin. When clients leave your office, case closed, fresh start, ready to go, what are you hoping that they take away from the time and the experience working with you in these life-changing moments?
Well, I hope they come away feeling that they were well represented, that I zealously advocated for them and their children, that I was responsive and listened to them, and that they felt listened to. And I really enjoy to see the growth of my clients over the course of the litigation, where they come to me, very frightened. They're worried about losing their house. They're worried about losing the custody of their children. I mean, these are very traumatic,
100%.
scary experiences. And I feel like with the team that I put together, I help them grow, gain knowledge about their own personal financial situation, about the interests of their children, about their own psychology, and the psychology of the relationship that helped kind of create this situation so that they don't necessarily get into that situation again. And to see people grow and become at ease in their lives after facing some very terrifying situations.
I love that. I'm sure that people are walking away feeling that way after working with you, based off my time speaking with you beyond the podcast here. I know I said one last question, but what you just mentioned brought up one other thing I wanted to ask you about. And this kind of, again, goes back to my own experience going through this with children involved. And we had, I wasn't not seeing my children. My children are since grown, but I got to see a lot of them and spent. They were in my life. They're still in my life, obviously. But what I was not prepared for, and was the post-divorce stuff, as far as like, hey, there's a start over here for a lot of different aspects of your life when you get divorced. Like, there are, you might be living on your own for a while for the first time in a long time, and getting back into the dating world eventually, if that's something that you want to do. I think there was no prep for me for that, and I'm curious if that is something that if you offer support, or if there are services that you kind of let people know that are available to them, like, hey, your life's going to change, obviously, you're not married anymore, that part of your life is done. What do you do to, is there anything that you have in place to kind of help people with that post-divorce kind of reset that's a part of your life at that point?
Yeah, well, usually when they come to me in the first instance, I say, okay, you need a therapist, your kids need a therapist.
Right.
Step one, because even if there's no abuse, it's still such a change. And to go through that transition, to be on your own and to perhaps be a single parent it's a lot. It's a lot of change quickly, and sometimes not by your own choice.
Right.
So having that therapist continue with you and keeping up the therapy until you feel really strong, and perhaps even most of your life to continue with your therapist. And so having a therapist who is familiar with divorce and the specific issues that in your family dynamic.
So you go ahead and I'll let you finish. I didn't mean to cut you off.
And then the other aspect, is again the finances. You have to figure out how much money you have. You may have to wait a year before you even know how the assets are going to be divided. So you're kind of living temporarily in maybe you're renting someplace or living with a relative. It's unsettling. And so, as much as you can speed up that process to identify the assets, to identify what your obligations are going to be in terms of support or child support or spousal support, getting your financial picture, and then understanding, okay, this is my financial life now.
Mm-hmm.
And now if the case is over and I can take my attorney's fees out of this, I'm going to have this much money. And then you can start planning for your future. So really just the people that I set up at the beginning of the case, the therapist and financial planner are going to do a lot to help you transition to single life afterwards.
That's fantastic. Again, like I said, my experience, there was no team in place. There was a lawyer who had paperwork that we signed and we were done and that was it. And it was like, good luck. So I love the fact that you were kind of setting that up from the jump. I wish that our attorneys had done that. I wish more attorneys would do that when it comes to family law, because, I equate it to it's like a death, right? It's kind of like a death.
It's the death of a community.
Right. And so there's a big transition after that fact. So, I mean, having gone through this, Aylin, I could talk to you about this all day. But I know that you're busy and you've got a lot of things going on. So I really appreciate you popping on and talking to me for a little while today. Let people who are watching live and people who are watching the recorded version of this after the fact, let people know how, if they need help with anything, how they can get in touch with you, how they can find you.
Yes, my website is aylinlaw.com, and that's spelled AYLIN law.com. And my email similarly is info@aylinlaw.com. And my Louisiana number is 504-535-4625. My California number is 650-314-9934. You can call, email, or go to my website. I have a form to fill out where you can schedule an appointment for an initial consultation. The first 15 minutes are free. And after the first 15 minutes, I will charge my hourly rate. And, during that first 15 minutes, we're able to kind of identify, where your case needs to go. So,
right.
Thank you, Will, for the time.
Absolutely. Thank you for coming on. And again, like I said, I've really enjoyed the conversation. I love talking to family lawyers because of my experience that I have experience there, dealing with custody, child custody, and all that stuff. So I've gone through all that. So I really like to hear that, like, oh, there's a better way to do this. So really,
there absolutely is a better way. And I just would like to give credit to my sister, Aylin Acikalin, who her firm is ADZ Law. And they're based in San Mateo. I mean, really, she and her partners were great mentors on this approach. And it's kind of unique to find an attorney, a family law attorney, who's going to take this approach. And you really, especially if you have a very aggressive opposing counsel or aggressive opposing party, having someone like me as your barrier to, protect you against that aggression really can create a great peace of mind during a very difficult process.
Absolutely. I agree. Having been through that myself, like I said before, I absolutely agree with that. Aylin, this has been great. Really, thank you for coming on. Those of you who are watching the live stream out there, we appreciate you guys tuning in. on our socials. If you're watching the recorded version on YouTube or listening on Apple or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts, we appreciate you guys as well. And we love the thumbs and the likes and the stars and all that good stuff. Putting that stuff in there really helps us get this show out to more people, to let people know what we have going on, and let other people, let our guests know. Let our guests tell people what they have going on and how they're helping people out. So we appreciate you guys tuning in. Aylin, thank you again so much. Really loved the conversation, and I know we're going to be talking more after the recording. And it's been a minute since we've had a chance to talk, so I'm glad to have seen you and had a chance to catch up. I will be back later this afternoon with another episode of P4P, and hopefully the guests will bring as much good stuff to the table as Aylin has here this afternoon. But until then, you guys take care, and we will see you back here for another episode very, very soon. Take care.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Partnerships for Profit. We hope you've gained valuable insights on how to form profitable partnerships and take your business to the next level. Be sure to subscribe and leave us a review wherever you listen to podcasts so you never miss an episode. Got a partnership story to share or someone you'd like to see featured on the show? Reach out to us. Until next time, keep building those partnerships for profit.